Welcome to Forever White Belt. I'm your host, Adolfo Ferranda. I am finally with my head instructor here, Tryphon Stathopoulos. Welcome to the show, Tryphon.
Thank you.
So it only took like 100 episodes almost to get this going. This is a little different format we're doing here than what you guys are probably used to. So I hope you enjoy it. And it's going to mean a lot to me here. Tryphon, let's talk about you. You are a black belt under Eduardo Rocha, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And can you give us a little bit more in terms of like your background and your history?
Well, I became interested in martial arts when I was a kid because I watched a Bruce Lee movie and I thought he was, really athletic and it was something that I looked up to. I also looked up to like Chuck Norris and things like that. And then when I got to be older, I started watching a show called Dragon Ball Z. And again, it just kind of the whole, kind of romanticized the whole martial arts lifestyle for me. So I started looking for different martial arts. As a kid, my mom put me in capoeira and karate, but I never stuck with any of those things. But when I turned 19, I ran into an old high school buddy named Adam Hirsch, who I played football with. And we were talking, and he said he was hurt from grappling, he said. And I didn't know what grappling was, so he explained it to me. And he said that they were doing grappling and other kinds of martial arts over in Corte Madera with a guy named Mike Valentine, who's still there in Corte Madera. And when I went there, I met Mike, and Mike was a karate black belt. And so he had started to integrate jiu-jitsu and wrestling and karate and Muay Thai and boxing into his gym over there. Practical Martial Arts was the name of his gym in Corte Madera.
Right, Practical. And
so that's where I got started. I started doing that, and I was just like, I loved it because it was just realistic. It was what I wanted. It was real fighting. And I was in love with all of it in the beginning. Kickboxing, self-defense, jiu-jitsu. But as time went on, I started becoming more focused on the jiu-jitsu, especially when my coach, Mike Valentine, met Eduardo Rocha. And Eduardo became his, Eduardo was giving Mike 2 or 3 private lessons a week, trying to get his jiu-jitsu up, and I was just the uke. I was just the training dummy, pretty much.
Wow.
But I learned a lot through that, and I started competing in jiu-jitsu, and I started doing good in that as a blue belt, and just training more and more. Then I started going and traveling out to Oakland to travel with Eduardo. To train with Eduardo, and my jiu-jitsu got better because of that, because of Eduardo. But at the same time that I was competing in jiu-jitsu, I was working for Mike Valentine, teaching the combined style of boxing and kickboxing and basically MMA.
Right.
Practical Martial Arts was probably one of the earliest MMA schools.
Wow.
Probably there was a lot of schools like him popping up around the same time, but definitely one of the earliest. And so, yeah, I learned from Mike how to teach. How to put the customer first. That's one difference between how I teach jiu-jitsu and how I see a lot of other jiu-jitsu gyms do it is, for me, I'm just kind of like, I'm here to serve you, and that's how Mike brought us up. And so, I learned a lot about how to have a good attitude, be a good teacher. I learned how to teach kids. And I just learned my craft from Mike. So I really can thank Mike for that. And I can thank Eduardo for my jiu-jitsu. He brought it up to high level, taught me how to be a competitor. How to win, basically, is another thing he taught me. And so, I owe a lot to both my instructors. Yeah.
Did you know that an academy was in your future when you were doing that?
Yeah, when I started working for Mike, I remember telling him, like, yeah, this is my career path. I choose this professionally. But there was times where I entertained other things, like I entertained being a nurse or a police officer or a fireman, like I think a lot of young men do when they haven't really found something, and they haven't gotten an education, which I didn't. I didn't go to college. And I just decided that was going to be my route. And it just seemed like no matter what career path I chose, it was going to be an equal amount of work and dedication to be successful in that. So I thought, why not choose the thing that I love most, which was martial arts. So yeah, I decided to do that, and I had no plan B. I just went forward, and it took a lot of sacrifice and a lot of time, but
yeah. So then your first academy, you get your black belt, right? And then
Yeah, I got a black belt in what Mike calls freestyle mixed martial arts, and so I'm well-rounded in boxing and wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is definitely my specialty, but I can I've taught kickboxing to people. I've taught self-defense. I even trained in weapons because there was a friend of mine named Richard Lowry who was going to Practical Martial Arts, but at the same time he was also working at the same massage therapy place that I used to work at. But when I was 20, I was a massage therapist.
Right. So
That's what I did instead of college. I went to massage school.
Right.
And so Richard was working at that place, and he was training at Practical. And so we became good friends, and he was like really big into weapons, swords, you know, sticks, knives, anything like that. And we would train in the parking lot of the massage therapy place in between massages when there was no work.
Wow.
And he taught me all kinds of things like kenjutsu. He taught me medieval sword. He taught me, you know, how to use a knife and all these things. And so yeah, Practical. I learned a lot of skills that I still share with my students. But then through Eduardo, I learned a whole different set of self-defense, jiu-jitsu related self-defense, you know. Whereas Mike is a little more Krav Maga style with strikes and eye strikes and groin strikes. Eduardo was much more classical Elio Gracie self-defense. So yeah, you know, I'm really grateful that I got to have that background. But yeah, I decided, I always knew I wanted to open up my own school. Actually, this was not the first school I opened.
Right.
A while back, I opened a school called Jishin Freestyle Martial Arts.
Oh, wow.
I was
No kidding.
Yeah, Jishin I think means like self-improvement or something like that. And the reason why I opened up the same style as Mike at that time was because I was still a blue belt, and I knew I wasn't going to get any respect opening up a jiu-jitsu academy. You know, nor should I. You know.
Yeah.
So
some people do. You know?
I know. Well, it's a different age now. It's
Yeah.
a different age for sure. Blue belts aren't what they used to be. You know.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, they're both worse blue belts and way better blue belts, just like all across, you know. But yeah, at that time, I wasn't getting that much business, you know, wearing a blue belt, but I could wear my freestyle mixed martial arts black belt if I was teaching freestyle, right?
Right.
So I did that, and I forget what year, but it was right around the time of a recession, actually. So that kind of failed. I was doing that over at the YMCA in Novato. And I was teaching everything, kickboxing, jiu-jitsu. But then the recession happened. I ended up closing that down, just going back full-time at Practical Martial Arts, which I had never left, but I was working less. And then, you know, North Bay Jiu-Jitsu was my second attempt to open an academy. And there wasn't any pure jiu-jitsu academies around. And that's what I felt like I did best.
Right.
So yeah, that was kind of my unique kind of selling proposition, I guess, as to open an academy. Yeah.
So when we talk about like the academies in Marin and stuff like that, we're talking about Northern California. So a lot of the context is Northern California, just for all you people out there for reference and everything. So you opened North Bay Jiu-Jitsu. Where is its first location when you do that?
It's always been in Novato. Originally, I was in downtown Novato, over at the Novato CrossFit over there. And I just rented out, you know, actually the first month he gave me for free. And then in that 1 month, I got like 1 or 2 students. And then from there, you know, I started paying him like $100 a month, you know, and then every month he raised it by 100. Eventually I was paying $1,400, and I had about 60 students.
That's great, because then you can just scale up. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great.
But then when I moved to this location, down at the corner there, you know, my rent went up to $2,500, like 1,000 more, and I lost 20 students in the transition.
Wow.
So it was a struggle. It was a struggle. And then also there was the fact that, you know, for every day that I taught for myself, it was a day I had to take off work at Practical. You know, it was a transition.
Yeah, that's rough.
So, you know, every time I'd make enough money to cover what I was losing, I'd have to take another few days off to keep expanding. So there's a lot of treading water for a lot of years, and a lot of, you know, work, just sacrifice, you know. But eventually, you know, it caught on, and I've been really fortunate to just have a lot of amazing people in my life have helped out, you know, including yourself and other people. So
now, thank you for mentioning that, by the way. But with North Bay, when you were thinking about like opening, you know, North Bay, what was your idea in terms of like culture? Like, I want to open this type of academy, and has that evolved and changed?
One of my goals is I wanted a school that would stand the test of time. You know, that would outlive me. You know, because you see a lot of schools in Japan that are like 500 years old. Yeah. And then wouldn't that be cool? You know. So
wow, I've never heard that answer before. That's interesting.
And actually, the original dojo, the dojo I still look up to is the Kodokan in Japan. I mean, it's like a 6 or 7 story building. One floor is just a library on judo. You know, they've got like training floors, they've got competition floors. So that you know, that's what I was imagining originally. You know what I mean? So, and you know, it still could happen. Also, my vision was to have one big school rather than a bunch of little schools. You know, where you could just control the quality. And then, you know, and I wanted to make Novato famous for jiu-jitsu. So, you know,
and
so I'm still working on that.
A ton of jiu-jitsu here. No, I think you're doing a great job.
I mean,
of it.
that's not just because of me. That's because of a lot of people. Yeah.
So, what is your favorite part of running a jiu-jitsu academy?
My favorite part about running a jiu-jitsu academy is that, you know, provided that I work in the right amount, you know, because if you work too much, no matter what you do, you're gonna burn out. But if I teach in the right doses, I'm just, you know, I'm excited to come to work. I enjoy sharing my knowledge with others. I enjoy watching them improve. I enjoy the connections I make with everybody. Like, you know, my students are some of my best friends, you know. They're not my only friends. I obviously have friends outside of that, thank God, you know, but yeah, you know, some of the best people I've met have been on the mats, and I know they are my students, and there is that professional relationship, but it does get blurred in jiu-jitsu. You know, they are kind of family, so
yeah, that's
probably my favorite part.
Yeah, and another thing I've noticed about this place, what makes it so super unique, is you have an array of different types of people here, whether it's ages and like just philosophies in terms of training intensity and things like that. And what I've noticed is a lot of other academies seem to have a specialty in one of these things. Yeah. And you have a lot of these things and you do it all really well.
Yeah.
Was that like an ambition out of the gate, or did it just sort of evolve into that way? Or
you know, when I first opened my academy, I was probably like a lot of other young men when they open academies, and I wanted my guys to be badass. I wanted them to be killers. I wanted to be, you know, like known for that, right?
Right, sure.
But then as time went on, and the reason I thought that way is because I always thought that that over at Practical, you know, because he's very inclusive to everyone, and it's about, you know, it's about what the majority, you know, is for the majority, right? And so I was thinking, like, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to, like, you know, just breed killers, right?
Yeah, sure.
And but then as time went on, I started to realize that, you know, the killers are far and few between. It's kind of genetic. You know, you can't pass that on to somebody. You can guide them in the right direction. You can give them the tools they need to be that. But you're not going to make killers. You know what I mean? You can attract killers, and you can make your environment be for them so that you attract more of them, you know, and so they congregate, you know. But at the end of the day, those are far and few between, and those killers aren't necessarily the ones who can, like, you know, afford tuition either, you know what I mean? So in the end of the day, as time went on, I realized that the best benefit that I give to society is not in breeding the killers. Those guys are great for inspiring others, but really it's like all the normal people who get so much out of jiu-jitsu. It just, I mean, for some people, gives them a reason to live, to, you know, motivation. Like maybe they're so bored in their lives, and they don't have anything, you know, so like definitely, you know, that's a big component of like what I feel like I offer, you know. I mean, self-defense is important. The empowerment of knowing you can handle yourself is important, but it's just like that day-to-day gift that you give to them, that's the most valuable thing I have to offer. So, you know, I keyed into that, and I kind of got over my ego and realized that that's where all the good stuff is. And I just try to make this place very inclusive, you know. Like, I got bullied a lot when I was in middle school, you know. And so my idea has never been to make anybody feel excluded or, you know, treat you different because you're kind of dorky or because you're weak or because, I mean, obviously I make fun of you sometimes, you know, but you know, it's because I feel close to you, you know, but, you know, but I just want to make everybody feel like they can accomplish their goals and not make you feel like you're less or not part of an in crowd. Like my academy is not cliquey. It doesn't.
That's one thing I wanted to bring up. I noticed.
That doesn't really happen in my academy, and so in that way, it's very inclusive. You know, if you want to go somewhere where you're going to feel like you're part of like some kind of like hardcore gang, you know, then I'm not the place for you. This place is not going to make you feel like you're some kind of badass. You know what I mean? But this is for like normal people to come and train, have a good time, and hopefully get a high level in jiu-jitsu. You know, you know, that's what I really want, is everybody to have good jiu-jitsu. So.
Has that been difficult? I mean, because all these academies, they run into challenges, right? Something that the academy owner is like, this isn't, I don't like this, or, you know, you run into problems, whether it's like challenging individuals or, you know, sometimes parents or just things don't align. How do you deal with those things?
When I get the dad on the sidelines who's keeps coaching the kid, because for a dad it's hard. You know, like on your first day of jiu-jitsu, you're not going to win. You know, you're going to lose, and it's hard for a dad to see their kid failing. They think that maybe the kid's not trying hard enough, or it seems like, you know, they're under the mount. It's like, why don't you just throw them off of you? You know, so those dads, I go up to them and I very politely say, it's like, you know what, you look like you're a really dedicated parent. I'm willing to donate you a gi, okay? And if you start training in the classes, you know what I mean? As a trade, you could be an assistant instructor and you can be on the mat and help. You know what I mean?
That's a great idea.
And then they almost always say no thanks, because as soon as they put themselves in the position of their kid, as soon as you ask them to get on the mat and wrestle, then all of a sudden they're like, you know, and then they be quiet after that, and they get the message, you know,
right.
That, you know, let us do the instructing. And the other thing is the reason I offer them that is because they need to be able to relate to what's happening to their kids, you know. Right. You know, my ex-wife, I remember she saw me do a tournament one time and I tapped to a triangle choke, okay? And then afterwards she was like, why did you tap, you know? And, you know, I just kind of like, I didn't get mad at anything, but then like a few years later she did a tournament. And then after the tournament, she was like, oh, by the way, I apologize for that comment I made 2 years ago, because now I know what it feels like out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So yeah, you just gotta, you know, for those parents, but yeah, I do have a rule. It's terrible when a parent is yelling. The other parents get pissed off. You know, so yeah, definitely that's a big rule. The parents can't. And if the parent's being overbearing, you know, I just talk to the parent. I just explain to them, like, this stuff's really hard. You know, you should try it out so you can see.
Yeah. I was recently speaking with Michael Liera Jr., and he's another person that sort of reminds me of you in a way, in the sense that he seems to have one foot in the tradition, in the old school sort of mentality of things. And when I say old school, I don't mean that with any disrespect. I mean that it's just sort of what it was. And then another foot in modern type of jiu-jitsu philosophy, et cetera, and running academies and things. So with you, for instance, here at the academy, we have a picture of Helio up, you know, some don't anymore. But we're not calling you sensei, and you know what I mean? I can call you Trifon. I don't have to wait for your approval to get on the mat if someone's running late or something, but yet we do line up by rank sometimes. So we sort of straddle these worlds. Can you speak about your philosophy in terms of that?
Well, most of my philosophy comes from my instructors. You know, for example, if there's any differences between the way, like let's just say who my instructors are, okay? Mike Valentine, American, you know, originally a karate man, you know, he has a certain way of doing things, you know, and he's American. He's been living in Southern Marin for a long time with those type of people, entitled, okay? And so there's that culture, right, of running a school. That was my first taste of school, right, of jiu-jitsu, of martial arts. And then I met Eduardo, and he's like this old school, you know, casca grossa Brazilian dude. You know, he's got great technique, but he's old school. He's very macho, you know, and you know, it's his way or the highway, and if you don't like it, there's a door, you know. And he, you know, he's very, I guess, blunt. You know, he'll tell you the truth, not necessarily the nice way, you know. And yeah, that's the deal there. But so that's where me and Eduardo differ. Like, the whole macho thing, and hazing people, like, if somebody is rough on another student, I don't go and kick that guy's ass anymore. You know what I mean? Because then you're just teaching him that, like, that's okay. You know what I mean?
Right, sure.
So,
absolutely.
I mean, Eduardo probably would smash you, you know what I mean? And maybe hurt you, you know what I mean? Or at least give you an unpleasant time, or tell someone else to do it. For me, it's like, that's not my way. I'll talk to people, I'll explain things to people. I try not to do too much of that kind of hazing stuff. You know, the other day a kid came in with a yellow gi or an orange gi, you know. So I don't make a big deal about it. I choose not to put my focus there, you know, because I'm not that way. You know, I'm not like perfect like that either. You know, sometimes I'll have a mismatched gi. You know, so yeah, I tend not to make a big deal about those things. I don't know if that's good or bad. You know what I mean? But
I like it. I think a lot of people appreciate
it's definitely more
that.
easygoing around here. You know, it's not. I'm not one to get mad about something that I myself might forget or something. You know, so yeah, it is pretty laid back in that way. You know? I'm not like a disciplinarian to adults. I'll tell you that way. You know, I'll have a respectful conversation with you if you're either being a hothead on the mat, or if there's any kind of issue with you. I'll come and talk to you like an adult, but I'm never going to treat you like a kid. You know, if you're you know, same age as me, or if you're an adult already.
Sure,
you know?
sure.
So that's one difference between me and Eduardo. Eduardo would treat you like a kid, you know. But I don't know if his way's better or if my way's better. I really don't know.
Every way's
You know?
better, man.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's a balance, you know.
Let's talk about technique a little bit. You have an elite half guard. Why did half guard resonate with you so much? And what are the pros and cons of half guard technically? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, you know, I was already gravitating towards half guard before I met Eduardo. Eduardo saw that I had a good half guard. he himself had an amazing half guard, and so he made mine even better. You know, I don't know how I gravitated towards that. I think it's because I would always end up there. I didn't have a very good open guard. I would always end up in half guard. And then I think one day I learned how to do a little chair technique, right? And then that was it. Like I was just sweeping everybody with that. Nobody could stop it. You know, and then I learned a couple more sweeps. I just kept adding on, and that's definitely my go-to. I just feel like it takes the least amount of athleticism. You know, the problem is when I first started in jiu-jitsu, even though I was a young man, I was in my 20s, I was partying a lot. I didn't have the best cardio. I wasn't taking good care of myself. So, but I still love jiu-jitsu. I still show up to class.
Sure.
So even though I do feel like genetically I am a good athlete, you know, culturally, like I wasn't always being very disciplined. You know, I didn't always do my cardio. So I never felt like I had good cardio mentally. So going into a match, I would never think, oh, I'm gonna outpace this guy, or even outstrength this guy, because I wasn't lifting weights either. I'd always think like, I bet you this guy can't defend my half guard, you know? So I would go in with that mentality, and I just gravitate towards my position, and I just had a lot of confidence in my techniques, because, you know, I would do the same thing on everybody in the gym over and over again, and over and over and over again. Get so much repetition and confidence in those movements. And so, yeah, I mean, I think because of my body type, I don't have long legs, because maybe because I'm on the stronger side. Half guard might lend itself to stronger people, I don't know. But yeah, I just always found myself there, and that was just what worked for me. But I also think it's my instructor. I think Eduardo is also an amazing half guard player, and he just taught me everything he knew. And I think, and like the Riberos too, a lot of my influence comes from the Riberos. Those guys have amazing half guards. And before I met Eduardo, I was studying the Jiu-Jitsu Revolution tapes from Saul Ribeiro, and it was working for me. And then when Eduardo met me, what I didn't know is he came from that same kind of school, you know. And so he was just able to take the crude stuff I was trying to copy off of videos and make it like really solid.
Right, refine it.
And then another big influence on me was Marcelo Garcia. I remember I bought a book called X Guard by Marcelo Garcia. I don't know if it's still in print, but it was amazing. It like I started playing butterfly guard and mixing it with my half guard. And then when MG in Action came out, I was all over that, just learning techniques. So that's also a big part of my game is X guard, like the old school X guard. Now I'm starting to use like the short hook and all that cool stuff, but that's what I fall back on the most is X guard and half guard.
Let's talk about the top game too, your top game. I noticed that, speaking of Riberos, it's very reminiscent of Ribeiro, just pressure, top game, headquarters, smashing. And another thing I noticed about your game too is when you're on someone, you're applying pressure, but you're occupying space too. You're not giving space. You're incrementally improving position or denying someone. Can you expand on your top game? And the importance of top game in general, pressure or whatever.
I think it's really important because even though submitting people, like let's say you pull guard, getting a submission is possible. Some guys are so amazing at arm bars and triangles and cross chokes and all manner of submission, but I mean, it's hard. Once you get some guy who's good, like another black belt, it's hard to submit somebody from the bottom. You're not in the most dominant position. You're going to get smashed, you know. The only good thing is if you go for a submission from the bottom and they get out of it, you haven't lost the top position, right? But it's much more practical to sweep somebody from the bottom, I think, right? And then once you're on top, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? Like your ability to pass the guard is going to be your ability to submit them and score points on them. Like what if somebody pulls guard on you? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think passing guard is extremely important, you know, because whether you're good at takedowns or good at sweeps, in the end of the day, you're going to have to pass guard, you know. I definitely got my half guard pressure passing from Eduardo, and he got it from the Riberos and from his experience, you know. But yeah, I got it from my instructor. He would just smash me. I mean, he just lays on you. He lays on you. He puts you in the half guard, and if you don't put up a knee shield, then you're screwed. He's just going to easily pass your guard. But if you do put up a knee shield, he's going to lay all his weight on it. And the longer you stay there without making some sort of action, the longer you're going to cook. And then eventually that knee shield is going to wear away like a piece of ice, and you're going to end up back where he wants you, you know. So Eduardo is the expert at forcing the half guard. He really pressed that upon me. And that's always how I've passed. Now, as a black belt, I'm learning how to pass like on my feet. Like, you know, I really like the I'm really working a lot of like that leg trap from it's kind of like a modified leg drag that AOJ is doing, you know, like I've been working more of that into my game, but really I just mix that in with the pressure, you know, like let's say I'm putting pressure and it's not working out, I'll back up, I'll move, I'll change the angle, then I'll reapply pressure.
Yeah, they integrate really well together.
Totally,
yeah.
You know, you got to have
hand
both.
in glove, it really is.
If I had to choose one to stick with though, I would say pressure passing. It's just, you put all your weight, you get the right angle, you keep your hips low, keep your knees off the ground, and you just drive into them and you wear them out, you know, and then, that's, I think, the most effective. And I think it's the best for MMA. It transfers all well to no gi and gi.
Yeah.
One thing that I was surprised of was when I was a purple belt in Master 1, I won the no gi worlds. And this was before no gi was as good as it is now. This is probably like 2011. Right. But I hadn't trained any no gi preparing for that, that tournament, right? But I still won it because the type of guard passing that I learned from Eduardo, it works even better without the gi because they don't have any grips to hold you back. They can't tie you up in a spider guard or a lasso guard.
Yeah.
So that pressure passing, it just works. And then the other reason is because in no-gi people use butterfly more because they can't play spider guards. So it just lends itself to the pressure pass. Like the body lock pass that Nick Rod does. Yeah. That's pretty much just like a variation of the type of pressure passing that Eduardo has always been teaching, you know. And so it works well. Gi, no gi works well for MMA. So all around, I think it's just a good choice. Toriando is great, but what if you don't have the pants?
Right.
You know.
Right.
So what are you going to do? And spider guard is great too, but what if the guy's not wearing a jacket?
Gi, yeah. So what do you wish you were better at? You kind of alluded to it and touched on it a bit. And additionally, to tie onto that, where do you want your game to go?
I'm kind of steering my game more towards the direction of catch wrestling. That's cool. Like less guard. You know, because my groin's been hurt for a little bit, and the more I try to triangle people and stuff and armbar them and play bottom game, the more it hurts. I mean, half guard doesn't hurt it so much actually, coincidentally, but like if I try to play close guard or too much, so I've not been using guard. I've been using turtle, and I've been, you know, studying freestyle wrestling and also like the Craig Jones DVDs that he came out, and there's a lot of wrestling information out. And I've been trying to do like more like catch wrestling where I'm trying not to be on the bottom. I'm trying to not be on my back very much and go to turtle and sweep from turtle or get up and get free. But yeah, the thing I want to get better at is takedowns. I want to get better at takedowns and I want to get better at leg locks. Those are the two things that are big holes in my game. Because my game's always been pull guard, sweep, pass. And up to black belt, I wasn't even good at doing submissions. I mean, I made a lot of championships as a blue belt just doing that. Pull guard to half guard, get a sweep, and then, you know, and then if you get a pass, that's a nail in the coffin. But sometimes even a sweep will win you a match, right? Or someone might pull guard on me and I force the half guard, even if I don't pass, maybe I win by advantage, right? So it's just a very boring kind of like game up until black belt. But as a black belt, I started focusing on submissions. And then I'm happy to say that I finally started submitting black belts in competition with like, you know, Ezekiel and cross choke and but yeah, you know, even submissions came later for me because competitive jiu-jitsu just makes you want to focus on sweeps and guard passes. Yeah. But then now, you know, I'm realizing, hey, you know, takedowns are so important. They're not rewarded by jiu-jitsu is the thing. So when I was in the mode of trying to win jiu-jitsu tournaments, it really didn't make sense to waste too much of my time getting good at takedowns when, you know, I could be getting better at my guard or my guard passing, you know? Sure. But now I want to be well-rounded. And also for my body, if you keep doing the same things over and over again on the same side, you get messed up. That's why I think jiu-jitsu athletes should practice their techniques on both sides, not just in repetition, but in action. They should use their takedowns just as much as they use their guard. You know, they should work their passing. They should work their turtle. They should work their freestyle wrestling skills as well. Even if it's not going to win you a jiu-jitsu tournament, you should know how to get up off the ground in the worst case scenario, you know, and break away from someone. So I just think the more well-rounded you are, the better it is for your body. And in the end, the better it is for your jiu-jitsu. Look at Roger Gracie. I mean, the biggest difference between him and other people is the development of his other positions, like side control, mount, back mount. You know, his ability to escape from those positions is better than yours. His ability to hold those positions is better than yours. And his ability to submit you is better, you know? So you make one little mistake with Roger and that's curtains for you, you know? And, you know, a lot of people you know, it took people a long time to realize it, how important it is, you know, over the long term to work, you know, every aspect of your game instead of just the parts that are going to get you the victory.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's very short-sighted.
Right.
And in the long run, you know, you're always going to run into problems, and also especially your body. Your body's going to get too strong in one muscle group. And like for me, I play half guard on one side mostly. So not only am I on my back working my anterior, you know, posterior chain, but I'm also just working one side.
Right.
So it's made my body very like imbalanced. My right leg is way stronger than my left leg, you know. So now in the weight room is where I try to balance it out.
Interesting.
But you could also balance it out in the training room if you just, you know, consciously do things both sides.
Sometimes I get listeners and viewers that write me and they bring up this, like, I want to work my weak side, but I'm worried about losing in the training room, especially in front of coach, who maybe I'm up for a promotion eventually or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people?
It's short-sighted. It's you just want that result for right now, right? But at the end of the day, you just got to look ahead and just realize that, you know, your investment in those things now are going to bear fruits later, you know? And I mean, being well-rounded is great because, you know, when I've always been the type of guy, I've got one good sweep, you know? But if you block my one good sweep, I felt almost helpless in the match, in a tournament, right? It doesn't mean I didn't know how to do other things. It doesn't mean that against a white belt in the training room, I wouldn't have pulled out a bunch of different sweeps and things and on both sides and all that. But then, you know, you get to be dependent on that one sweep, and you're so good at that one sweep in relation to how confident you are in that. All this feels like it's nothing. So you go to the tournament and you don't get your main sweep, you feel like you lost already. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if you're very well-rounded, if you can have confidence to go into different areas and to try different things in the tournament, that's what makes you truly dangerous. Those are the guys who are like unbeatable. It's like those guys will beat you one way or the other because they're confident. They're not scared to move around. They're not scared to scramble. They're not scared to try the other side, right? But the only way that you can gain that confidence is you have to give up always needing to win in the training room. You have to take more risks. You have to let your buddies think that they were better than you that day. You know what I mean? It happens to me all the time. I'm an instructor, and sometimes, like, I will be, you know, let my guard get past. You know, sometimes I'm curious, like, what's he going to do? Or, oh, he's got my arm. Oh, is he capable of finishing it, right?
Yeah.
And but if I do get tapped, or if the round does end and I didn't get the better of them, I don't feel the need to go and explain to them, like, oh, I was going easy on you, by the way. Don't get any ideas. No, I just take it. You know, it's good for your ego to just take some losses. And remember, you know, the training room's for training. It's not the competition. If you want to do good in the competition, be focused on getting better in the training room. And getting better means fighting from your bad positions, doing your bad sides. You know, it means losing, because if you don't struggling, you're not getting better.
Can you mention like an aha moment that you had?
That's a hard one for me, for like a big general aha. I can tell you a little aha I got.
Yeah.
I was at a Roger Gracie seminar. I talk about this guy a lot, but, you know, and he just showed one detail, like, you know, to move the person's face with your back of your head before you put in the Ezekiel. And that was a huge aha moment. Nice. Like, I went from not even attempting the Ezekiels because I thought that didn't work, to using it to tap. One of my opponents had the Pan Ams in a black belt match. I tapped a black belt with it, you know, and it was from one little detail, you know. So that was a big aha moment. Yeah, and just, I mean, I had a big aha moment the day I realized no one could stop my little chair sweep. The day I realized that 90% of, 80% of people will let you force the half guard without putting up a knee shield, you know, and that, there's like, I realized like two kind of people. There's either people who put up a knee shield, or people who don't, and people who don't even put up a knee shield in a half guard, then those people I know I could beat easily. So whenever I'd grapple with somebody, I just kind of see if they let me get in, and if they did, I realized like, this fight is over. So.
What makes a great jiu-jitsu student for you?
Number one is commitment and dedication. Meaning you decided, commitment meaning you decided that you want to be excellent at jiu-jitsu, and you've decided that you're willing to do what is necessary, which means that you're going to be training pretty much at least 5 days a week. You know what I mean? Now, on top of that, somebody who, listens you know what I mean, who pays attention. Someone who's focused, you know, someone who will learn the move of the day and try to apply it, ask pertinent questions, not just questions about technique, but hopefully questions about diet, exercise. You know, someone who's self-motivated. Jiu-jitsu is a very individual sport. It's very rare that your academy is gonna have a lot of competitors. If you're not self-motivated, if you're not willing to do the journey kind of like partially on your own without being handheld, then you're not gonna be a great competitor. But yeah, as far as a student goes, aside from competitor, yeah, a good student is just at the gym. You know, he doesn't train once or twice a week. He trains 3 or 5 times a week. You know, a good student is a great training partner. You know, people want to work with him because he helps you learn the technique better. You know, a good student is even learning the technique when he's being the uke. You know what I mean? So there's that. Someone who's not hurting other people when they train. You know, someone who knows how to control their pace and who can just leave their ego out of it. You know, I mean, you do need some ego, right? You do have to be competitive. You can't just lay over for your training partners, but your ego can't be so big that you don't want to roll with that guy because you don't want to lose to him. Or your ego can't be so big that you don't want to tap. Your ego can't be so big that you're willing to rip your partner's foot off on a straight ankle lock, you know, because you just need to tap him that bad. You know what I mean? You know, which I see people do all the time. You know, they can't pass guard, but they know that if they go for that foot lock fast and hard enough, they'll get like a fear tap. Then a lot of times they end up hurting their partner, you know, because you go for that hard, there's no time to tap, you know. So, you know, just your ego, you got to leave your ego out of it, and you got to love jiu-jitsu, and that's what makes a good student. And someone who's, you know, willing to go to a tournament and lose and come back, train, and come back and try again. You know, you can't easily be discouraged. You got to be in it for the long haul. You know, if you're in it for the long haul, then in 1 year you'll have passed everybody. In 1 year you'll be already on your way. You know, and in 5 years you'll be a black belt. You know what I mean? So that's
5
my
years,
opinion.
you said.
Oh yeah, if you're training like the way you're supposed to, you know what I mean? But not everybody has that kind of time, you know? But if you're really getting after it, you know, you're watching your diet, you're lifting weights twice a week, you're getting into the gym, you know, depending on your age, we'll say like 3 to 5 times a week, right? Even if you can't train because your body's too broken or whatever, maybe you come in and you practice technique, you know what I mean? You know, you're taking time to stretch. You're investing some of yourself into that, you know, and it's hard to ask of people because it doesn't pay you any money, you know what I mean?
You're paying,
But yeah, I guess I'm getting a little confused between what makes a good student, what makes a good competitor. You know?
Right.
If you're asking about what makes a good student, it's just consistency, love of the sport, being a good training partner to others, and just being diligent. That's it, you know, and not watching so much YouTube, you know, because that's really confusing. You know, at least understand what your instructor's trying to teach you first, because you can ask him questions. You can't ask a video questions, you know, and you don't know what system that technique is part of. You know, he'd have to show you a lot of other things too, you know, whereas your instructor, he can tell you exactly where it fits into everything else he's taught you or how it connects, you know. So yeah, that's another thing, you know, don't get too lost in the videos. But I don't want to speak too soon because I have some young guys here who, you know, I don't really teach leg locks, and they're into them, and they buy the DVDs, and they go home and they practice in their garages, and they get really good too, you know. So I'm not saying that you can't get good from DVDs, but at least they use us as a resource. They'll come to me in Paulo and they'll say, hey, you know, what do you think of this? And, you know, so.
Yeah. So Tryphon, what, conversely about the student then, what makes a great instructor and why?
A good instructor is going to have the energy to go and correct, you know, the white belts, you know, and teach them how to do, you know, a basic thing, you know, for the 1000th time, you know what I mean? And still keep that same, you know, enthusiasm, because you have to remember that that's your 1000th time showing a white belt how to do an armbar, you know, but that's the first time that our white belts ever done an armbar. So, you know, you got to key into that, and that's your job. Your job is to continue to teach people who don't know jiu-jitsu, you know, so you kind of you gotta embrace that and realize that it's your job. You're providing a service, you know what I mean? It's not their, you know, privilege to be in your presence, or, you know what I mean? They're paying you. So I think a good instructor has to have that in mind, is that it's a service industry. You're teaching them something, and they don't know. So, you know, be patient, don't get angry, don't have a tone, you know, like, you gotta be patient with the white belts. I think that's what makes a good instructor. And then also a good instructor, I think, you know, knows how to, you know, because as the student starts to get better, you know, then there comes another challenge. You know, you have to teach them everything you know. You know, but that can be done in a relatively short period of time. Like maybe 4 years, they're going to learn the core of what you've learned in like 15 or 20 years. You know, and then from there, you know, they're going to kind of start to learn things on their own. You know, and you know, I mean, that's been my biggest challenge is, you know, how do I provide the right environment for, you know, purple belts as they get better and better. I've gotten better at it. You know, like we used to be a school that had mostly white belts and blue belts. Now we're having a lot more purples and browns and more blacks now too, you know. But yeah, you know, how do you keep those advanced belts in it? How do you keep them interested? How do you keep it new and exciting for them? So for me, one way I do it for those who don't compete is, you know, I give them opportunities to teach. I want to start to make them more accountable for learning information, you know, and passing it on. And then, you know, other than that, I think competition is a great way to keep those advanced belts focused and getting better, you know. But, you know, also a good teacher does continue in education, you know. Just because I'm a half guard player doesn't mean that I shouldn't study spider guard or invite a spider guard specialist to come do a seminar. Like, you know, you've invited Charles to do you know, a couple seminars now, and that's really helped out my school because I don't do leg locks and he's really good at them, you know. So I think a good instructor, I guess, realizes his limitations, but doesn't make those his students' limitations. You know, like, for example, you know, my instructor, he doesn't like leg locks, you know, and he doesn't teach leg locks, but now what's the result? You know, his black belts, they're not good at leg locks. You know, it's a hole in their game that they have to fill. You know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
So I guess those two things. You know, a good instructor will patiently teach a white belt and turn him into a good, solid blue or purple belt. And then, you know, on top of that, you know, once the person has learned their style, you have to find a way to continue to give them more. You know, and I mean, for me, you know, with my purple belts, a lot of them, you know, you included, you guys do have a lot of continuing education, you know, and you guys do share a lot of, you know, information with each other. So for the more advanced belts, I am still teaching them, but more so I'm providing them an environment for them to continue to further their own education, you know. I guess one thing personally that I could do more is provide a little more of like, not open mat time just for fighting, but open mat time for drilling. Encourage people to come and, you know, actually drill those techniques they've been watching on YouTube, you know, and see how they do fit into their game, you know.
Interesting.
So, you know, maybe that type of a thing could be done for the advanced belts. But yeah, I think that's what makes an instructor. You got to be patient and you got to be diligent, whether it's continuing education, learning new things, whether it's being patient and walking across the mat and helping those people that need help, you know, instead of talking with your friend and whatnot, which a lot of us will prefer to do, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that work that you put in, that's what makes a good instructor. I mean, who's the best instructor? John Danaher. You know, what does he do? He devotes all his time to his students. He's watching tape all the time, and he's not watching tape. He's teaching people, you know, and he's observing, and it's how much time you invest, you know. I would say I'm a good instructor. I'm not as good as Danaher, you know, because I have kids, you know, I have a life, you know what I mean, outside of jiu-jitsu. But yeah, I would say just like anything, the more energy you put into it, the better you are. So a good instructor is someone who puts a good amount of energy. A great instructor is someone who puts a great amount of energy into it, who invests themselves, you know, like a good coach. You know, a good coach, he'll take that weekend off to go to watch your tournament, you know what I mean, even though he's not competing, you know. So yeah, I think that's what makes a good coach is what you give, you know, what you're willing to give, you know.
There's so much to unpack.
But there's balance. But there's balance, you know. You can't, if you give too much, you burn out.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess you have to find out how much you can do, you know. Like for me, it's been about, you know, sometimes teaching less classes is teaching more classes. If I taught 12 classes that week or 15 classes that week or 20 classes that week, you know, those last 5 classes aren't going to have as much enthusiasm, you know what I mean? But, you know, if I space it out, if I delegate, you know, if I trust my other instructors to teach, you know, because they're also talented as well, right? And I reserve myself, you know, it makes me a better instructor when I can give more when I'm not teaching all the time, you know? So that's part of it, being realistic with what you can do and doing the best you can with that, you know.
That's another very unique thing about this place. You brought up a lot of things there. One is that you allow your students and the upper belts and stuff to explore as much, you know, on their own, or just explore things that, you know, might not work for them or whatever, but they're trying things out and you're cool with it, and then they come back to curriculum, you know.
Yeah.
And then another thing is how you're dealing with, well, let's talk about curriculum too, because really the average just Joe or Jane, they'll show up 2 to 3 times a week, let's say, maybe, right? Yeah. And you're hoping that somewhere in your curriculum that they're getting something, right? Right. So in terms of deep learning, how do you deal with that? You know what I mean? Yeah. Because that's a huge challenge. And then let's talk about your curriculum planning as well.
Right. Yeah, that's a challenge, because for someone who comes 5 days a week, you know, he should be on a different program, right? But you can teach that person so much more. You know what I mean? Someone who comes twice a week, it's like, you know, they're not going to get as much repetition. They're going to have to learn at a much slower rate. But then those 2 people are still in the same classroom. There's the guy who's been here 3 times this week already, and there's the guy this is his first time this week. This guy's done the butterfly sweep for 3 classes in a row. This guy just didn't do it yet. You know what I mean? Right. So, you know, this guy's ready to learn another variation. Right. This guy over here, he can't even do the basic one. You know, what do you do? You know? So, and this is something I did, and then, you know, it got lost, you know, because I was taking too much time off. Now I'm working more. Now we're going to get back to it. Is basically you have to have a beginner class, and you have to have an intermediate class, you know, and an advanced class, I would say, would be something done in the morning by the instructors. You know, I mean, that would be advanced class, like, you know, or some, you know, but you have to have separation of classes. If you have an all-level class, you're always going to have that problem. And unfortunately, you have to play to the lowest common denominator. Yeah. You can't teach the berimbolo if it's an all-level class. You have to teach the hip sweep. You know what I mean? So I think that's the only way to solve that problem as far as curriculum. And you need to have more than one curriculum. You need to have a basic curriculum, and you need to have an intermediate curriculum, and those things need to build on each other, you know? So you've mentioned it, the fun aspect of different teachers teaching different things too. You know, it has an entertainment value, that's for sure, because people come to jiu-jitsu for fun, but is learning a bunch of different moves going to make your jiu-jitsu that much better? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's better to just do one move so many times, you know what I mean, until you know it so well, and you've attempted it so many times, and then you learn more jiu-jitsu, because you keep attempting that sweep, people start resisting it, and then you ask a pertinent question, and then you learn more, you know? So there's a lot to be said for, you know, just repeating the basics. But yeah, everybody on the same page, beginner, advanced curriculum. But then with my instructors, I'll work with them. I'll say, is there anything you want to add to it or take away? That way they don't feel like they're just, you know, like a robot. And then they get 3 weeks of every lesson interspersed, right? Yeah. And, you know, hopefully if somebody's consistent to class and they've had that same lesson for 3 weeks within a month and a half period, hopefully they don't need that lesson again. Hopefully they don't need to even review that again. Like, hopefully they've learned it, done the repetitions, tried to use it in training, and it's in their memory banks. And it's up to them. If it vibed with them and they really want to work on it more, they can do more reps after class on a particular move, or it could be stored up there for later. Like, there's moves I learned as a white belt that I didn't start using until I was a black belt. I learned them as a white belt and I remembered them. I didn't actually start using them until later, right? But in my mind, that's how it should be. And then in that way, you get through a basic curriculum, and now you don't have to study that stuff anymore when you go into the intermediate. Right. But what do you do once they've learned the intermediate curriculum? You know what I mean? Now you have to give them a venue of just self-development and just give them resources. Because now there's a point where your students are just the same off as you are. They don't have as much experience as you. They haven't seen as much. But they're also kind of on a path of continued education, just like their instructors, you know, like, because there's new stuff coming out all the time, right? Yeah. So we're all put in a position where, like, we have to keep learning, you know. So yeah, but what the instructor has is the experience. Like, if you look at something on YouTube, I can help you to sort the trash from the valuable stuff, you know, because maybe maybe it got something I know because my experience might help you, you know.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Can you tell me a time that you wanted to quit and why? Or consider?
I've never considered stopping jiu-jitsu, I'll be honest with you. I could never do it, you know, but I've done it less because it hurts my body. You know, I do jiu-jitsu, I feel the wear and tear on my joints. I know it's only going to get worse. So what I've chosen to do is fight different, you know. I've overused the guard, you know. The guard is a tool that I've overused. So
I've
now
heard that a lot from you guys, you seasoned black belts, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it's not in an advantageous position. I mean, it's a neat trick, you know? I mean, no one in a street fight expects you to break their arm when they're on top of you, beating you up, right? And so it's great to know for self-defense, right? But do you need to train so much as a jiu-jitsu athlete trains, or as much as we train to learn how to break someone's arm in a street fight? Not at all. I got in a street fight about 3 months into my jiu-jitsu training, and I was able to execute an armbar, you know? So, like, yeah, it's overkill, you know? Like, you have to think, why am I doing it, right? And if you're a competitor, I can see why you would just do the guard to death and do just on one side to death and just overuse that one move and trash your fingers on your lasso guard and trash your back doing berimbolos and trash your knees doing lassos, you know. I can see that because you want to get that gold medal, whether it's just to say you did it or whether it's because it's part of your career. In my case, I saw it as part of my career. You know what I mean? That's why I wanted to win championships at the time that I did. Once my career got established, I actually lost a lot of motivation to compete, you know, because like sometimes I go to a tournament, I'd be on the plane ride over there, and I'd be like, why am I doing this? I'm taking time away from my kids, taking time away from my business and my students, and I'm also spending money, you know, and for what? To get like a little gold medal, you know what I mean?
Right.
And what's it going to do for me? You know, it's not going to make my students give me more or less credit, you know what I mean? It might inspire. I mean, that's the one thing competing does for my students, is it gets them off their butts to go compete, you know, when they so that's the main value I see behind it, you know? But aside from that, you know, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And so I'll tell you why, though, I do still compete. It's not very often, but every now and then I'll get out there. It's because, you know, it kind of just keeps you from getting too far out of shape. It's good to have goals. It's good to work towards something. It's the process, you know. But, you know, I think maybe the amount I was competing before was maybe a bit much, you know. But I think if I compete once every, like, couple months at a local tournament, you know, just take advantage of the ones that are here, or maybe travel just for the Pans or just for the Master Worlds, you know, like that's, those are doable things.
The big things.
That don't take away, you know, from my life. But yeah, I considered it recently because, you know, I'm getting older, I'm 43. And, you know, the jiu-jitsu is harder on my body, but yeah, I've never considered like quitting. I've just considered how I do it. You know, I'm now learning new things, like leg locks. Leg locks are a good thing for me to learn. That doesn't put strain on my back. You know, takedowns, you know, I want to learn them. I don't want to go hard takedowns because that's damaging to your body, but it's just an area where, you know, if I'm better at takedowns, then I'm on top more, basically. So,
let's talk about your thoughts on the belt. Expectations in terms of like each belt color. And just the relevance of the belt nowadays anyways. Can you just talk about the world of the belts?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most difficult thing in jiu-jitsu is the belts. If you look at judo, they've got like a universal like world curriculum, you know, that everyone agrees on. You've got standardized tests, you know, everything is just like boom, boom, boom. You know, Jacob Maxson recently, he just got his brown belt, but, you know, a few months before he was having a conversation with me about like, you know, he's like, I'm not asking for my belt, but I'm just wondering what your criteria was. He just pretty much was asking me what you're asking me, right? And it was so hard to answer that question because, you know, jiu-jitsu doesn't have any standardized tests or anything or any requirements. It's all up to the instructor.
Yeah, right.
And after a while, I mean, I can imagine some students are like, well, what gives this guy the right to decide my value and my worth? You know what I mean? It all comes down to the trust you have in your instructor, you know? And then if you're not getting your belt when you think you are going to get it, then you start like, you know, it's like a battle between like, you know, is he not noticing me, or am I just not good? And, you know, so that's one of the hardest things. I would say one thing that you should that helps out is just the criteria of time that's been given by the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Federation. You know, for example, there's no time limit from going from white to blue, because you could be a black belt in judo, or you could be a college wrestler, and you're going to get your blue right away if you're going to compete, right? So, but for the blue belt at least, it's 2 years, okay? And for the purple belt, it's 1.5 years. For the brown belt, it's a year, okay? So it's about 5.5 years, but you know, that's, okay, 2 years, 1.5 years. So, but then white belt, how long should you stay at white belt? I think white belt's probably a year, okay? Now, this time that they've given, I think should be considered the minimum, right? I think that you should get a black belt in 5.5 years, meaning, 1 year at white belt, 2 years at blue belt, 1.5 years at purple, and then a year at brown, right? I think you should get it in 5.5 years if you're training full time.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
It's a big difference between the casual 2 to 3 dayer a week versus the 5, even 7 dayer or 6 dayer.
So that's how I calculate it. Okay, I tell myself, for me to give someone a belt in 5.5 years, what do I think they would have to accomplish in those 5 years? And the answer is they would have to train at least 4 times a week. Okay, at least 4 times a week for that entire 5.5 years. Okay, and if they want to be on the fast track, they damn sure better be competing.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay, if you don't want to compete, great, but don't expect your belt to come faster. Right. Okay. So, so those two things, how much have they trained and how much have they competed? Okay. Now, so I can actually make that requirement pretty easily. I can just calculate, how many weeks are in 5.5 years, and then I can multiply that by 4, and that's how many attendances should have been had minimum, right? That should be how many times you came to class. So then it's easy for now to take that guy who comes 2 times a week and explain to him why it's going to take him, 10 or 11 years to get that same belt that the other guy got in 5.5. It's going to take you 11 years. You know what I mean? So that's how I do it. And that sounds about right. But, I used to train all the time and I competed a lot, and it took me 13 years to get my black belt, But that's because, I got a blue belt and I met Eduardo. He found me to be a very low level blue belt. He held me back for a few more years. And then at purple belt, he held me back. And Eduardo's criteria was pretty strict. You had to win a championship where you beat at least 2 people. You had to win a championship for every stripe he gave you. He wouldn't give me a stripe unless I won a championship,
Yeah.
So between blue belt and black, every stripe was a championship that I won, but he didn't do that to everybody, I think he just did it to the people who were competitors. He would put that mark on them, so.
But what about your ideas in terms of competence per color? So what are you looking for in terms of competence in a white belt? What are you looking for in a blue belt specifically, and just sort of up the chain?
After 23 years doing jiu-jitsu, I have to say I really agree with the way Saulo Ribeiro outlined it in his book, Jiu-Jitsu University, where like the first chapter was the white belt chapter, and the white belt chapter is nothing more than survival. Okay, as a white belt, you should always be caught under the mount, under the side control, be in somebody's back mount. Okay, and the first skill that you're going to develop is just simply to be aware of submissions, like, okay, don't let him wrap his arm around my neck. Okay, now I can stop him from choking me. Oh crap, how am I gonna, now I gotta stop this arm bar. Okay, I'm stopping the choke, I'm stopping the arm bar. I can survive here, okay? That's what you learn as a white belt, how to survive in the bad positions, because that's where you're gonna end up. You're a white belt. You're gonna be just getting submitted all the time, and your only accomplishment is not to get submitted, okay? Then as a blue belt, you start learning now how to escape out of those positions. Obviously you learn before that, right? As a blue belt, you probably learn a lot of things, but one thing that you're spending more time in now as a blue belt is your guard, right? Because you're getting out of side control, you're stopping people from passing it. So now you're starting to get to more neutral positions. So that's why in the book he kind of highlights escapes as a blue belt. Purple belt, he highlights the sweeps, the guard, and I think that's true because learning to sweep is easier than learning to pass guard. Not in the beginning. As a white belt, it's the easiest thing, right? But then as people develop a guard, you'll find it easier to win by 2 points of a sweep than to pass somebody's guard.
Now we're talking more gi emphasis here, it sounds like, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Gi. And so, and also purple belts tend to be the ones like, blue and purple where they're more competitive too. So now sweeps become really important because the easiest way to win a tournament is to pull guard and get a sweep. You know what I mean? It's much easier than being the one to have to pass the guard or win by submission. So that's why I think purple belts should be good at that, and then brown belts, they should be the ones good at passing because now they've learned how to get out of bad positions. They learn how to get to the top, and so now they're learning how to get into the dominant positions. And then black belts should be the ones be learning how to submit people because now They're spending all the time in the dominant positions. They're the best ones at the academy. Most of the time, they're in side control, mount, back mount. And so now it's the time for them to learn how to finish people, you know?
Offense.
And that's exactly how it was for me. You know, as a white belt, it's just survival, right? As a blue belt, I remember I learned one good sweep, okay?
Yeah.
And that won me a lot of blue belt tournaments, you know? As I became a purple belt, you know, I started getting better, but as a brown belt is where I felt like I'd solidified my guard passing, you know, and then now as a black belt is finally I'm doing submission. So I guess that's one way to view it. But if I were to put it in my own words, I would say, you know, a white belt is hardy. You know what I mean? His muscles are tight. He's got a good sense of base now. He's got a good awareness of like danger, you know what I mean? And he's just kind of a little harder to kill. You know
It sounds like he's just getting ready to do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, he's like,
finally.
he's just getting all, exactly. A blue belt, he should now have a trick up his sleeve, you know? A blue belt should have some techniques that he can rely on. He should know, you know, like, yeah, he should be getting some kind of confidence and some kind of technique at that point instead of just being completely confused, you know, like a white belt. You know, a purple belt, you know, now you should be even more refined and starting to become more well-rounded, you know? And as a brown belt, you know, not only should you have already refined your strengths, you know, but now as a brown belt, you should be trying to fill in your deficiencies, you know? And a black belt is just gonna be extension of that. Once you got to the black belt, the journey has just started. Now it's all about, you know, what am I not good at? How can I get better at that? You know what I mean? So, but it all starts, it's like a spider web, you know? That initial thread as a blue belt is like, is there one freaking technique that I can pull off consistently, you know? And then everything is just gonna start to build off of that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then as a black belt, you tie all those things together, you know what I mean?
So your advice to those that are interested in opening an academy, your ups and downs, mistakes you've made, just advice to them, things that they could avoid, you know, ideas there for the new printed black belts out there.
Yeah, yeah, that's a hard one. I could tell you what my journey was. You know, basically, you know, I started this school with 0 students, and I took a big financial risk by taking days off work to do it, and by paying for the rent and everything. You know, so for me, it was just the amount of work, the amount of sacrifice that I put in. That's what built this place. The commitment. You know, I didn't consider another option. So I was there, whether there were students there or not, I was on the mat waiting, you know what I mean? And there was a lot of nights where there weren't, you know? But little by little, it's like a one piece of driftwood and another piece of driftwood, and then pretty soon, you know, you've built a raft, you know? So I will say this, you have to be committed, and you have to be, it's not gonna come easy. And it's not always encouraging. Sometimes it's depressing. Sometimes you're wondering if you're doing the right thing. Sometimes but you can't give up on yourself. You can't, you know, you can't waver. You have to really go all in. That's what I think. You know, if you have a backup plan, you're never going to go all in. And yeah, it takes risk. It's financial risk. You know, you have to buy mats. You have to pay rent. You have to give up your time that you could be working doing something else. And so, but then at the same time, what's the other option? You know, trying to poach students from the academy where you already came up from. You know, that's the only way that people can try to skip this painful process. And they try to do it all the time. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But yeah, you know, in the end of the day, if you're that faint of heart that you feel like you need a crutch in that way, then you're not going to have what it takes to really go through the, you know, the uncertainty, you know, of starting a school or starting any business, probably, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what I would say is like put your heart and soul into it, you know. Bend over backwards for those, you know, couple students that come in the door, you know what I mean? I used to do an introductory lesson for every single kid that would come in. I don't do it anymore because I don't have the time, and I don't need to anymore, you know what I mean? But in the beginning, I was desperate, and I would do introductory lesson. I put, you know, that lesson would go on for like half an hour sometimes, you know, and so it's about energy and commitment. Right. And sacrifice. I think that's what my advice would be, is be prepared for that, be willing to give that. And aside from that, you know, things that maybe mistakes I made along the way that I would do different. Yeah, just, you know, recognizing, you know, personality types, you know what I mean?
Good point.
You have to choose the right people to be on your team, you know what I mean? So you just have to recognize, you know, who are team players, who are, you know, the same spirit as you, you know what I mean? And you have to be realistic with yourself, and you have to just, like, you know, be choosy what kind of you know, who you bring in
Yep.
to work for you, first of all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've heard this.
That's important because as you get, and also realize you will need people to work for you. You cannot do it by yourself. You can do it by yourself for only so long.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to grow, you're going to need to train somebody to be able to teach what you teach, you know. And then the other half of that is you also need to know when to step back, you know. Like
Yeah.
that's what I've done recently. I've realized, you know, I've been training my brother and Paulo for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If I don't trust them, you know, then
Yeah, then what
when
do you
am I
do?
ever going to
Yeah.
trust them? And if I don't trust them, have I not taught them anything, you know?
Yeah.
So taking a step back and watching them go through the same process as I went, because when I was a young instructor, I wasn't that great either. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying they're not great. They are. They've been doing it for a long time. But, you know, at first, you know, I had to learn the ropes. So giving them an opportunity to, you know, learn and make mistakes and get better and become elite instructors, you know, which they've become, in my opinion. I mean, people love their classes are huge.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean? There's definitely, you know, everybody enjoys their classes. They got great personalities, and
They do. Yeah,
and you
they're
just
amazing.
have to be careful who you put to teach for you. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think that's something that I would say. Sometimes the person who wants to do the job is not necessarily the person who should do the job. As a matter of fact, the people who shouldn't do the job are usually first in line to do the job.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Totally.
So yeah, you know, be choosy. It's okay to be picky about who you bring in. And then the other thing is, yeah, give your heart and soul, but also if you give too much, then you're not giving anything at all. You know, have balance. You have to have work-life balance. You are going to have to work, I think, a little more than normal in the beginning. You know, but you have to have a solid business plan. You have to have solid goals, and you got to be moving forward because you can only burn that candle at both ends for so long, especially if you're an athlete too. You know, when I was starting my business, I was also an athlete. I work all day and then I'd go train all night.
Yeah,
And
I
I was
don't know how they
burning
do
it
that.
at both ends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you can only do that for so many years. So, you know, just, you know, that would be my advice, you know.
Well,
That's about
everyone,
it.
this is Tri-Fun. I'm Adolfo, your host. Thanks for watching, and like, share, subscribe, you know, the whole thing. Become a VIP member. We do that. It's $1 a month. Come on, people. And Tri-Fun, I just want to say I can't thank you enough for
thank you, Adolfo.
you know, having this place as my home away from home, and I
Yeah.
love it. And it's
We love you
know,
back,
spent
man.
all the years here. It means the world to me. It really does, and everyone here.
Thanks,
So
man.
thank you.
Thanks, bud.